Welcome back to the Epic Universal Podcast. I'm entertainment writer Jim Hill, and this is the podcast where we cover the latest Universal news, rumors, history, and as always, I'm joined by Eric Hersey, who, now, forgive me, folks, but given that Universal, they do time travel there. Back to the Future, okay?
Sure, yeah.
Okay, so you're listening to this podcast on Friday, July 17th. By the way, Disneyland's 81st birthday. But Eric and I are recording this thing on the far off date of July 1st, 2026. And that is because the Hersey family, again, is piling into a car and driving down to Central Florida, where they're going to check out. Are you doing any time at Universal this time?
Oh, yeah. We booked. She either booked Estella Nova or Terra Luna for a couple days. And we're annual pass holders, so we're going to hit them all up. I don't know if we'll hit Epic. I think it all just depends on what our mood is. We just did Epic not so long ago. And once again, we are annual pass holders, so we can get in the other two parks without having to pay extra. So we'll see how froggy we are and how liberal we want to be with our money. But for the most part, yeah, we're definitely doing plenty of Universal, so we'll have all types of stuff to check out.
Well, I bring up July 1st because today, the Universal Orlando Resort sent out a press release talking about all of the stuff that they're going to do for this 4th of July, which is, of course, the 250th anniversary of the birth of our nation. And Eric, I couldn't help but notice there was a kind of a running theme for this. Like, for example, over at the Epic Universe, the party starts on July 4th at 5 p.m. with appearance of patriotic stilt walkers. And then at 9, they're going to get a special 4th of July fireworks display with in the Cosmos fountain in front of the Helios. And then it'll close out with the nightly fountain show at 10 o'clock. And by the way, also worth noting here, by the time this podcast airs, we'll have they'll have started doing the official, what is it, the Kiss Goodnight, the Celestial Goodnight?
Yes, the Universal Celestial Goodnight, but that's on the 7th, right?
Yeah, starts on Tuesday, July 7th. But anyway, all right, so now, what are they doing over at Universal Florida, for, the 4th of July? Well, they have entertainment, at the Music Plaza stage, and they also have patriotic still walkers, and also Sensational, the Symphonic Spectacular, that's going to be out on the lagoon at 9, and then brief pyrotechnic display at 10 o'clock. So, and then finally, if we head on over to CityWalk, they're going to have a family-friendly thing going on there with patriotic still walkers. Eric, I'm concerned. All right, please tell me that these are not the same patriotic still walkers, because it's hard enough walking wearing those things. But if they've got to run from Epic Universe to Universal Studios Florida to out to CityWalk, it's very, very tired, tall people.
In July, Jim, in July,
In July!
Yes, yeah. Let's hope there's plenty. They have lots of the stilts in the back.
More to the point. I mean, again, and I kid the still walking people, but they do a great job. I mean, in fact, they are, to my way of thinking, some of the most impressive stuff in the parades they do there. In fact, Eric, just telling a tale out of school here, Nancy and I went down once for a holiday media event at Universal, and they presented the Universal Holiday Parade featuring Macy's. And there was one young lady dressed in a skin-tight candy cane outfit on stilts. And, look, I'm a happily married man. I would never cheat on Nancy. But if there had been a ladder available at that time, she was lovely, but it wasn't meant to be. I mean, I'm 5'8". All right, I'm old now. I'm shrinking. I'm 5'6", and she was 20 feet up in the air. But oh God, lovely girl.
Oh well, Jim also doesn't help you diabetic, and if she's a candy cane, that's just
that's
not
right.
good for you.
It's a diabetic person. I have to stay away from giant candy canes. But speaking of high in the air, the other thing that's fascinating about what Universal is doing for this year's 4th of July, and again, I apologize. You're hearing this on the 17th. 17th, so you didn't get to do any of this. But up on the roof of the Aventura Hotel in the Bar 17 Bistro, they did a family-friendly 4th of July rooftop gathering. And again, Eric, have you, again, I know you've made a number of trips to the Universal Orlando Resort at this point, but have you managed yet to stay at the Aventura and, more importantly, get up to Bar 17 up on the top there?
No, I think the closest we got was Cabana Bay. That's in the shot, right? But yeah, we haven't hit that one up. I've seen it.
Oh, at some point, you seriously have to go up there. In fact, what I love about the fact that they did the family-friendly 4th of July rooftop gathering is that when you're up there, you have a clear line of sight of everything within 30 miles. And, I've personally been up there when, you're up there, you're enjoying an adult beverage, and first the fireworks display goes off at SeaWorld, and then off in the distance you get the fireworks from the Magic Kingdom, and then the ones for Disney Hollywood Studios, and then you get to see the Epcot stuff. And when I was up there, they were doing fireworks in downtown Orlando, and let alone the ones that are happening right in front of you over at Epic Universe, and then inside of Universal Studios Florida. It's really, 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 you want to get up there sometime around 8 or 9 o'clock at night. Park yourself down by one of the tables, with a great view, and just take in all of the pyrotechnics that go on there.
Well, the beauty is, Jim, if I'm down there on the 17th when this releases, you never know. Maybe I'll be at Bay 17 on the 17th when this releases. It could all line up perfectly. We just need to write a note to my future self.
Well, there we go. There we go. All right. Well, we'll have Marty bring around the DeLorean.
There we go.
Okay. Well, but we got a lot of news to talk about on this week's show, folks. And also, we have a really killer feature this time around that discusses a pretty interesting moment in Universal Hollywood history. But here's the kicker. Eric's telling his story. But again, we'll get to that in a moment. But before we do that, we first have to acknowledge our sponsor, and that is UnlockMagic.com. And if you are planning a trip to the Universal Orlando Resort or the Walt Disney World Resort, you really need to check out Unlocked Magic. The listeners to the Epic Universal podcast are saving up to 12% on theme park tickets. Plus, you get to save on after hours, the hard tickets like Mickey's Not So Scary and Mickey's Very Merry Christmas Party, and not the Jollywood Nights. But if you're interested in this sort of stuff, head on over to unlockmagic.com and save today. And speaking of today, again, Eric and I are recording this on the far-off day of Wednesday, July 1st, which is the day that Minions and Monsters, the latest film from Illuminations, debuts in theaters. And Eric, we already have some box office numbers about how this 8th film in the Minions and Despicable Me franchise has done so far. And as of today, it supposedly sold $13 million worth of tickets just in North America alone. And current box office projections, Eric suggests that Minions and Monsters will make at least $170 million worldwide over the 5-day-long 4th of July weekend. So again, it'll be interesting when this thing airs on July 17th. Actually, all right, that's what they said it would make.
Did it happen? Yeah. We can make our predictions now and see how good we are. Do they get to the $1 billion?
Yeah. Well, now, speaking of which, this is the first Minions movie since Despicable Me 4 came out in July of 2024, and that film made $972 million worldwide. But before that, we had Minions: The Rise of Gru, and that was released 2 years previous to Despicable Me 4. That was June of 2022, and that made $940 million worldwide. And that's the thing. The Despicable Me Minions movies, Eric, are ridiculously stable. Again, evidently Illuminations is very disciplined about these movies. They typically bring them in for just $70 million in production costs, and they then typically go on to sell, damn near $1 billion worth of tickets worldwide every time. So very, very reliable performers at the box office. So hearing that, and more to the point, Minions Rise of Gru, June of 2022, Despicable Me 4, July 2024, and then we have the new one, the Minions and Monsters, July of 2026. So they're already working on the film for 2028, right?
That's what the math says.
Well, what's interesting, that's not what the head of the studio says. Chris Meleandri, the head of Illumination Studio, in a recent interview with Deadline, said, well, in the Despicable Me world, it's so hard to find a story that ignites a level of interest. So when it comes to, another sequel, another one in the series, there's always conversations, but at the same time, we're searching, always searching for the idea that something that will ignite our interest. But to be honest, we haven't found that yet. So that said, Meleandri did admit there is a Sing 3 now in the works at Illuminations. Secret Life of Pets 3 is also in production. And there's a brand new original title from Illuminations, Not Alone. That's also in the works, and those will all be released by Universal Pictures. So, that just be aware that those are over the horizon there. And I want to say on the most recent Epic Universal podcast, we talked about what was it, Shrek 5, and then the Donkey film that's coming for 2028. Yeah. So
I'm actually looking forward to Sing 3 a lot. I can't believe that I enjoyed the Sings as much as they have, but I am a giant fan. So if they're making a Sing 3, that's good for me. Although I think there'll probably be a Despicable Me coming 2028 or so. They'll figure out a way. It's hard to pass up $900 million when it's just printing money. You'll find an idea.
Yeah, but that's what's kind of interesting is if you think about it, we found Gru's brother. Mm-hmm. Gru now has a son. And that's the other thing, given that Shrek 5 is built around Shrek with now his teenage sons, Fergus and Farkle, and I forget the name of the daughter, Felicity, maybe?
Probably.
Voiced by Zendaya, by the way. So it's not like the folks at Illuminations can suddenly go, hey, Gru now has teenagers. It's like, no, they're doing that over at DreamWorks. Come up with another idea. Though maybe they'll do some surveys and find out what people want to do, in a Despicable Me film. And speaking of surveys, you have a pile of Universal-related surveys to share, Eric.
Yeah, I figured we'd share some stuff. We got an Epic Universe survey out there. So, it's not, it's not questions that we probably haven't seen, but, what we do with the surveys is we try to predict what they're going to do and why they're asking questions. So I got a couple here, and I just want your take on it. The first one's not too crazy, but it's just how would you describe the opening and closing time, basically, of Epic Universe on the given date that you went? And it's just really easy questions. Is the opening and closing time too early, just right, too late? So anybody in their right mind obviously says we should open earlier and close later, right? Unless you're an employee. So the person answered correctly on this, but that's just a normal one. But then it's just a matter of now using the list below, select the following reasons, if any. You describe why you went somewhere outside of Universal Orlando Resort after leaving that day, and it has you select all that apply. And it's some things like there wasn't any nighttime entertainment, which they're fixing right now. Something else to do, weather, I did everything, attractions weren't enjoyable, food and beverages were disappointing, had negative experience, that kind of stuff. Or it was too crowded. So there was a lot of lists there. So I just, in general, this question came to us prior to their Nightworks, Fireworks, and so forth. We know from previous surveys that there hasn't been enough to do in many people's eyes. But do you think the nighttime fireworks is going to solve that for them? Or do they think that's going to be the case?
Well, look, historically, I mean, if we're talking the original Disneyland, and I want to say it was 61, 62, with Date Night at Disneyland, where the first fireworks or first nightly fireworks were introduced. And then, Epcot historically had problems until, people just walked out the door until they were given a reason to linger. There's a show. It starts at 9:00. Please go eat in that restaurant. Yeah. MGM did this. Sorcery in the Sky, and that was a fascinating pyrotechnic show because they again, the park wasn't built assuming that it would have a nighttime show, so that they literally had to build a fireworks launch platform to the right of the Chinese theater, and then figure out how to put a cold Sorcerer Mickey inflatable on a roof there. Think about it. Which park empties the earliest at Walt Disney World? It's Disney's Animal Kingdom.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Because you can't have fireworks in that park because you'll terrify the animals.
Yeah.
So, I think Universal reliably and is looking at this, and think about it, even over at Island Adventure. How are they keeping people in that park? It's like, oh, well, you got to go up to the Wizarding World and you got to watch the castle show. And by the way, while you're there, buy a butterbeer.
Yeah. Well, it's just interesting though, Jim, because yes, this fireworks show will help you stay longer, but it's still a matter of if people are saying there's not enough to do or what in the park. Realistically, we're still years away from more attractions showing up.
Yeah, we are.
So you're going to have to, now it's just a matter of, well, I guess I will either wait and, line for this thing again or go do it again. But it's interesting that I do think that they'll have more people there. But I guess they're trying to gauge as if you're getting a bunch of stuff done. If you feel like you've had value, if you got everything. And, on our recent trip, we had the hack and we were almost done at noon minus one land. So, but I also know that depending on you go, you might not get everything done because the lines are longer. So it's just kind of interesting that they're gauging this. The other question that came through that I thought was pretty interesting is, which of the following do you think describe How to Train Your Dragon Isle of Berk? Please select all that apply. And they're your normal questions like high quality is well maintained, something for everyone. So they're asking directly about this land. And then the follow-up question is, and please tell us what to extent you agree or disagree with each of the following statements about How to Train Your Dragon Isle of Berk. And a couple of the questions will be appealing to guests for years to come, felt like a complete world, can be appreciated even by guests who are unfamiliar, is something I would experience again and again, attention to detail, and they basically had you agree, disagree, and so forth. This was the only question for this land that came through on this survey. So it wasn't like they were asking this for all of them. They literally were just asking for one land. So kind of interesting in a sense to that seems like the most complete land to me, right? Would you agree? To ask that question seems like, do they have ambitions of adding more, or are testing to see if they need to add more?
Well, what's interesting about the Isle of Berk, and remember that we just had the Theo Awards, and that this was the land that was the award winner. The park won, the land won. I want to say it was for ride. Was it the Frankenstein experiment? I forget.
Yeah, I think there was one. I think there were two separate types of ones. I think the Ministry one and Frankenstein.
There we go.
The monsters and. Was there were some winners there, but yeah, the Isle of Berk was notorious for winning the best land, right?
Yeah, and for a lot of people who work in themed entertainment, the Isle of Berk is considered. This is the new yardstick. This is what you want to do in themed entertainment. In fact, what was fascinating earlier this month when Universal Kids opened in Frisco, Texas. It was the Isle of Burke that was used as a club to beat the new Universal Kids Park. It's like, oh, wait a minute, you look what they did for Isle of Burke. Look at this amazing theming, and look at how finished that was. And then I'm looking at Frisco, Texas, and it's like you guys didn't even finish planting the planters. You didn't paint the cement. No, I mean Isle of Burke for a lot of folks in the industry is going forward. Universal's direct competition is going to be chasing that. And in fact, let me make a prediction here, Eric, because by the way, I just learned that evidently the contracts for Villains Land for Walt Disney World got signed. So it's a go.
Yeah.
They have a design, they have a plan, the contracts are signed. But Isle of Burke is what Villains Land is going to get compared to.
Right. That's what made them change what their original idea was, right? They went back and say, we need more like this kind of deal, which was crazy. So it is insane. It's interesting that they're asking specific questions about this to gauge. Like it seems like, or maybe they're just waiting for it to be like, no, it's good. Maybe they're just like making sure that, hey, we don't need to add anything. It's as high as it possibly can. But it'd be weird. It's almost like what the Imagineers do with Pirates in Haunted Mansion. It's like this attraction's perfect, but they always plus it. They just always seem to, they can't like just stop tinkering. And I'm like, are they going to do that with Burke? It seems like there's other things that they might want to work on, and Burke seems to be fine. But
and by the way, a quick Universal tieback. Did you see any of the videos that are out there for the new figure for Pirates of the Caribbean? They put in the treasure cave the transforming pirate.
Yeah, no, I did. I saw that throwing out on lots of them social media, all types of stuff there. Yeah.
Okay. What I love about that is, and I know Disney now owns The Simpsons, but what I love about that figure is he makes Homer Simpson noises. It's like, ooh, so it was one of these things where it's like, wow, a little taste of Universal there in the the treasure cave of or at least as long as Universal hangs on to The Simpsons, which again we keep hearing is 2028. Say goodbye to Springfield.
Right. Well, and the last one here, speaking of Disney, this was, and I don't recall ever seeing stuff like this on a Disney survey, but it just says, for the following statement, please select the theme park in your opinion that did the best during your visit. And it was atmosphere, guest service, having a lot to do, featuring fresh, featured advanced technology, rides, and so forth. And it was Universal did this better, the same at Universal and Disney, or Disney did this better, which is just, I mean, obviously that's what everybody wants to know, but I think maybe with their internal questioning, this is maybe how they can tell if they're gaining market share in the eyes of the public, maybe? What do you think? Or is,
I mean, we are right now, folks, in the middle of an arms race. Think about it. All of the work that's going on right now at Universal Orlando. We're watching Poseidon Fury get torn down. For potentially another Nintendo-based property going in there. We have the work that's being done on the Fast and Furious coaster that comes online next year. Universal isn't kidding around in the Orlando market, and to a lesser extent, we're seeing the same thing out in California. In fact, do we have an official opening date yet for Fast and Furious Hollywood Drift yet?
Well, I feel like I can get out of this by saying it's the 17th, Jim, so we don't know. Maybe they announce it on the 10th. Maybe they announce it on the 12th. You never know. So we'll get out of this one. It's a beautiful thing when we're recording in the future.
There we go. But no, I mean what's going to get interesting as when we see Piston Peak and Villains Land come online, and not to mention Tropical America and the indie redo of Dinosaur. Universal is got some big guns that they're bringing to the stage. I mean, for example, it's one of the worst kept secrets in regard to the expansion of the Ministry of Magic, but the next ride coming in there in the Harry Potter world is is a broom.
Yeah.
That's what's also interesting about you sharing these surveys is that Universal does surveys of guests all the time, and they listen to what the guests want. And that's what's come back, over and over again from to the effect of, I want to be able to ride a broom. And it's like, okay, they finally figured out how to do it in a way that satisfies guests and will also have decent capacity. But again, because they haven't officially announced it yet, we can't talk about it.
Yeah, we don't know anything about it, right?
Soon.
No. So that was the question. So yeah, if you got anybody out there who wants to anonymously send us surveys, we love looking at them. It's it's just a look into the future, and we hypothetically try to figure out what could be coming attractions.
Okay, but when we get back from this break, we are headed back to Universal's past, this particular Universal Studios Hollywood, where Masters of the Universe made an appearance there. But before we talk about that, we got to do this. And we're back. And as I mentioned at the top of today's show, we've got a great feature today. But what's really great about this feature is I didn't have to write it. Eric came to me about a week, 10 days ago, and pitched this idea, which I thought was lovely, because we had the Masters of the Universe movie had just arrived in theaters. And, actually, I'm stepping on your research here.
You're perfect. It's perfectly teed up because we were actually, you and I both were tagged in a post on Twitter, beginning of June, maybe, from Stingray Travel, a great, follow and always sharing interesting and fun things. But it shared a couple old pictures, like Polaroids almost, of like He-Man and Skeletor and Orko, and it was posing with kids at a character like meet and greet, and it was at Universal Studios Hollywood's in what we believe the upper lot. So there was a second picture that was, I think, a young sorceress and maybe an attendant, a couple more kids. But these photos were taken in mid-'80s, so they're about 4 decades old, and they were kind of circulating online. So I started seeing them all, and at that point in time, you're almost thinking to yourself, hold on, what is Masters of the Universe associated? So I had to look it up. It's like, that's not a Universal property, is it? But it's funny because we were just down at the parks, and I was in the, the shop that lets you out of the Bourne Stuntacular. You go right out, and it's that shop. You have the giant Frankenstein, in the electric chair, stuff like that. But there was a little section there that had Masters of the Universe apparel, and looked it up. And I noticed it last time we were there, but there were ball caps and long sleeves. And I think there was a sling bag, but the really cool one was this brown corduroy jacket with a giant Castle Grayskull stitched across the back. Those jackets you wore in the 80s that you'd patch up. But this one had a giant back patch that said "By the Power of Grayskull," and this was all in their store. And I'm thinking to myself, all right, it's because of the He-Man, the Masters of the Universe movie. Because, like you said, they just got a big budget live action movie made.
They did, and by the way, this is airing on Amazon, and also want to stress here that we don't. I was hoping by the time. Well, again, here we are in July 17th. I was hoping by this date we'd have information about when this Travis Knight movie would be available for folks to watch digitally. And obviously, it's produced by Amazon, so it's going to turn up on Amazon Prime. No info so far on that. All they suggested was late summer. But what's interesting, Eric, is evidently Amazon has already committed to a second Masters of the Universe movie. So still trying to track down when that'll go into production. But
Right. So, yeah, and that's the funny thing is, so if Amazon and there's Masters of the Universe, there's nothing that, character or theme parks love better than IP that's popular. And truth be told, they're always trying to get that male demographic anyway, a lot of them. So the thought is, all right, they've been in Universal. Is there something there? Is He-Man going to get his moment at Universal? And so that's kind of got us peaking and got me thinking of all right, what's the odds of this? And question, is it possible that we get He-Man in the theme parks? And I think over the course of the next, 10, 20 minutes, we'll find out what are some of the thoughts, but it's a maybe not. But there is some hope, I think, because we found some entertaining aspects. But we're going to dig back a little bit before 1985. So we are, we're going further back to relay on this. So it actually wasn't He-Man that was the first kind of person we looked at. And it's somebody we've mentioned before. It was actually a barbarian that got there first.
That's right. Conan the Barbarian, the creation of Robert E. Howard. A pulp writer working out of Texas. Got to wonder how close to Frisco, Texas it was. But he sells his first story to the magazine Weird Tales at a tender age of 18. But this story really doesn't get started till the Depression, right? The Great Depression.
Yeah, it seems like in, it was about 8 years, 1924. So like 8 years later, he was, I guess his savings were completely wiped out, by, obviously the collapsing banks. But he was inspired. He was traveling around in like a border town near the Rio Grande, and it actually had him like conceive this brutal mythic world that Conan would inhabit, and the kind of man who would, come from it. So Conan debuted in that Weird Tales, I think in December 32. And it's funny because Howard wrote 21 Conan stories before his death in 1936. So he died when he was 30. So it was a tragic tale, but like he obviously had a lasting thing because Conan the Barbarian had all these stories. So in 4 years of work, he effectively invented an entire like genre, because I don't think there was any like sword and sorcery genres prior to that.
Not really, no.
Do you have any idea like who Conan, like the myth of Conan? Because I've always heard of it, and of course I know it from somebody we'll talk about a little bit later. But who was Conan? Like, what was his whole story?
Well, I mean, Robert E. Howard, conceived this character. He's a wandering warrior from a fictitious prehistoric era. And what did he call it? The Hyborian Age? Was that the... Yeah. And I think it was like loosely modeled off real human history, but like obviously rearranged. So it had its own like continents and kingdoms, but it wasn't our continent kingdoms, right? And and Conan doesn't start off as a very admirable character. I mean, he's a thief, he's a mercenary, but over the course again of these 21 stories, he fights his way through corrupt cities. He deals with sorcerers and monsters, and over the course of these stories, he becomes a king by his own right. And that's kind of the premise that runs through all of these Conan Barbarian stories. That again, through brute force, our hero hacks his way out of danger. But again, the whole sword and sorcery genre, kind of owes its origin to these stories. And Conan then goes on to become, a cult favorite for decades, and kept alive by pulp reprints, and then in the 70s, Marvel launches a comic series that introduces this character to an entire generation that never read Weird Tales magazine. And it's a success of the Marvel comics that puts this it brings us to the attention of Dino De Laurentiis, the movie producer, right?
Yeah. So that's when ultimately that's kind of I think the Conan that most of us know, because they kind of came together, and I think John Milius signed
John
on.
Milius, yep.
Yeah, there you go. I knew you knew this.
Okay,
but he signed on to direct and co-write. But what's funny is that Oliver Stone actually did an earlier pass of it, so we know him. But the one we all know is the 24-year-old bodybuilder named Arnold Schwarzenegger that was cast as the role. But this is where Universal first gets into it. Universal Pictures actually distributes this film in North America, and Conan the Barbarian, opened in May 82, and it did pretty well, right?
It did okay. I mean, it's just a $20 million budget, grossed $70 million worldwide, and by the way, definitely set up a sequel. In fact, the last image of this movie is of the old Conan sitting on his throne, the king. He's finally achieved, but it's teasing. You want to see how he went from being the thief and the mercenary in this movie, where, by the way, he battles with James Earl Jones as the snake guy. But you got to come back. And by the way, just weird little side note here. Eric, once upon a time, I'm upstairs in the Frank Wells building on the Disney lot. And I'm in the wing of that building where they are developing the the home premieres. And at this point, they were working on a trilogy prequel to Snow White called Dwarves.
Oh, okay.
All right. And, I just remember coming into the pod where they had all of the artwork set up. And this is about how you find out that the dwarves are actually all kings of their own little kingdoms. And in fact, they come together because the witch is threatening Snow White. And again, this is the whole point of this trilogy. But the thing, I walk into the room, and there, dead center in the presentation board, is a concept drawing for this, yet to be produced film series. And it's grumpy. But it's grumpy in the exact same position as Conan the Barbarian at the end of the first film. I mean, him in his throne looking, sternly into the camera. And it's like, I just turned to the guy who was walking me to the universe and say, I would give you money now to see this movie. But yeah, now there was a sequel that, in fact, I guess we should talk about this because first Conan movie was R. And then I want to say it's Conan the Conqueror. That one was deliberately PG because, again, it's Universal Pictures that's making these things. And they realized, well, if we want these to play out to as broad an audience as possible, they can't be R.
Right. And that comes into play a little bit later when we start talking about the man of the hour, He-Man. But but Universal had essentially, because they were making these, they saw that success with these films, they kind of were, in the game. So at the end of the day, they were kind of, you told this story before, and we'll tell a little bit here, is Universal Studios Hollywood was looking for a stage show at the time to fill the Castle Theater at the upper lot. And because Conan was such a success, and they were like, hey, we got all the pieces here, they took at it. So by the 80s, the Universal Studios tour was looking to, it was a 20th anniversary at that time, probably around there. And they were kind of riding the coattails of this hit movie. So in 82, and this name is a bit familiar. Gary Goddard.
Yes. Gary and his team at Landmark Entertainment, they took on the Conan project, the notion of could we turn this into a theme park show, and as you mentioned, putting it into the Castle Theater, so it's like not a movie, not a ride, a stage show. How do we do that? And so the Adventures of Conan, a sword and sorcery spectacular, it opens June 18th, 1983. So that's literally a year after the R-rated Conan film starring Arnold Schwarzenegger debuts in theaters. Universal puts up some cash to produce this thing, depending on who you talk to, $4 or $5 million. And what they do is they take the 2,200 seat theater that had previously held the Castle Dracula show, and they create this live stage show where it's Conan and Red Sonja battling the evil sorcerer Tars Morder. And having seen this show in person myself, Eric, got to tell you, the highlight was when the 18-foot-tall animatronic fire-breathing dragon came out of the hole in the center of the stage. And between, lasers shooting out of its eyes and fire breathing out of its mouth, spectacular show, killer show. And more to the point, the performers on stage, ridiculously buff. They found just the right people to play Conan, and and Red Sonja.
Yeah, and it opened and it stayed open for a long time, well beyond like 1993. So, and I guess it closed for Beetlejuice's Rock and Roll Graveyard Review.
Well, I mean, just that was the thing. What's interesting about theme park shows is just, over time, it's like, okay, it's been a while since we have a Conan movie. On the other hand, we have, the Beetlejuice, the Tim Burton film. And it's like, all right, let's go with that. And let's be honest, between the same period of time, between 1983 and 1993, a certain other muscle-bound hero who swung a sword came on the scene, right?
Right. And you would almost think, all right, because He-Man kind of gained popularity, and we'll talk about that, but you'd think, all right, maybe he would replace it. But that's not the case. They actually kind of ran together at the same time. So, like, Conan did come first, but there's no doubt about it that He-Man was a direct, creative inspiration, almost down to the muscles and the sword. And there's a wonderful series on Netflix. I don't know if you've ever watched. You ever watched The Toys That Made Us?
Oh, no. They did amazing work. In fact, they're the folks who did the Attraction series.
Yes, they did.
For Disney Plus.
Right.
And, it was one of the things, as soon as I heard, it's like, oh, it's the Toys Are Made, Toys Who Made Us guys are doing stuff about the Disney parks. It's like, okay. That's the perfect choice. Absolutely perfect choice.
Right. And it was and they tell you the wonderful story of how this was created. But that's funny because, Conan was started kind of as a pulp story, comic and so forth. And he had his movie and everything, where He-Man did not have any of that. He started as a toy, the whole thing was a toy, and then everything else came afterwards. So that's what's really, really funny. And to kind of talk about the Toys That Made Us, you kind of meet some of these guys. So Mattel's toy designers, and it was led by Mark Taylor and Roger Sweet. They've been developing what would become the Masters universe since the late 70s, maybe early 80s. But at the time, they were kind of looking to do a Conan action figure. But the hard problem with, hey, we're going to sell this brutally, horrific kind of guy, our movie, to a bunch of kids. And that kind of had Mattel back off.
Yeah, I mean, that's the hard reality. It's like, we want to sell this to that audience, but it's just the fact that it's based on an R-rated movie, which means if your kid has seen it, A, he snuck into it at the movie theater, or B, it means when the VHS of this came out, or the beta, you're not a good parent. You let your kid watch an R-rated movie.
Right. So that's not what the toy action line was kind of going on there, but they didn't want to put that development away. So truth be told, much of the sword and sorcery design and so forth, that was with the Conan, the muscular, the primal fantasy aesthetic, the sense of brutal prehistoric world, it kind of got folded directly into the lore of He-Man. And actually the resemblance was close enough that the Conan properties sued Mattel, saying, hey, this He-Man is just simply, Conan with a blonde wig. But, that was dismissed. It didn't actually happen. And we did get our He-Man. But it was very much not just thematically similar, but it was very direct commercial sense. Mattel built the real thing, and it just proved too risky that it'd be on a toy shelf if it was Conan. So the first Masters of the Universe action figures, they came out in 82. And it was funny, from what I've looked at, it was really the licensing deal with Filmation, which is the studio that actually made the cartoons, was just approached to make a commercial. And that turned into a cartoon series, which was pretty much the ads to sell the toys. So the toys were before the commercials, which is just crazy to think about.
Oh, yeah. I mean, and what's interesting is folks who collected the first wave of the He-Man figures, they came with a mini comic, right, to explain the world and that sort of thing. But again, the folks at Mattel, it's like, well, it would be easier for these things to move to a wider audience if they didn't have to read.
Well, how about the kids that can't read? When I got mine, I was like, I don't know how to read yet. So you watched so they did it brilliantly, and then they ended up going into what syndication, or they basically made a ton of them. But in September 83, they were on pretty much all broadcasts, and there were all types of, the shows on American television. So 135 markets at its peak. So, and this happened for 5 years. He-Man was everywhere. Toys, comics. Yeah, I mean, I believe a lot of us were He-Man at some point in time in Halloween, and then She-Ra came out as a spin-off, and it was just merchandise like crazy. Pretty much all the grade schoolers knew about He-Man, She-Ra, and there was just a bunch of miniature Eternias all over the place.
And by the way, if you enjoyed the original He-Man Masters of the Universe animated series on Filmation, you actually have Jim Shule to thank. He worked on this show. In fact, if we ever circle back around on this, we have to bring Jim in because he tells some wonderful stories about, let's not call it recycling animation. Let's talk about finding interesting ways to repurpose previously done pieces of animation. Yeah. And of course, our friend Mr. Shule worked on all sorts of theme park things for Disney. And speaking of theme parks, when we get back from this break, we're going to talk about how He-Man found his way into a Universal theme park, but for a limited time in kind of an interesting way. But before we do that, there's this. And we're back. All right. So again, we, He-Man launches, Mattel creates its sword and sorcery based action figure line. And that's the early 80s. And by 85, this thing's just cooking, right?
Yeah, I mean, from a children's property, you couldn't probably get any better. I'm sure the Kenner Star Wars toys, and then there were He-Man, and Barbie, but it was just everywhere at this point in time. So, pretty much what they tried to do is just, hey, we got He-Man, it's hot. How can we make this happen? And the first place they actually started was actually in the mall and the mall circuit. So there were costume personal appearances that actually drew enormous and sometimes uncontrollable crowds in the 80s. There's a story of the 1985 fairgrounds. I think it was in Abilene, Texas, that had 8,000 kids. Again, they thought there was going to be 1,500. So they actually forced the organizers basically to cancel it midstream because they couldn't handle the crowd. That was an intense. So, but theme parks are a little bit different. They don't have to worry about that. They have the establishments where you could have these characters and it can actually you handle the crowds and so forth. So they essentially He-Man's this is where it's been. The only confirmed appearance that I could find at a major American theme park came in 1985, the holiday season. And that's when Universal Studios Hollywood hosted a Mattel-sponsored meet and greet on the upper lot. And it's the same lot where Conan had been, headlining his shows for 2 years at that point. So they were concurrent. They were running at the same time. But this event ran from December 21st, 1985 to January 5th, 1986. And there are some wonderful commercials over on YouTube that actually have this actual ad. Did you get to check this out, Jim?
They do. Yes, I again, that when Eric told me about this story idea, did my research on my own, and you can go and look at these ads yourself, folks, and they are fascinating because it's not just one or two characters; it's 14 heroes and villains from the world of He-Man, and that immediately became my question, and it's like, where did these, and again, it's a short event over the holiday season in 1985, December 21st through January 5th of 1986, and what was especially got kids from Southern California going, "Mom, take me there," was that every child from the age of 4 to 11, when they entered the park, would be gifted their very own He-Man figure with paid admission to the park.
Tell me that's like a dream come true for a kid. I remember.
No,
I would have been all about it. And I mean, so first thing, if you're listening and you are one of those kids, I want to hear more about this because there is one little wrinkle here, and neither one of us could really find it. There are a couple reports out there that said that would happen again in February.
Yes,
and I could not find any confirmed sources. So as of right now, December 21st to January 5th is what I've seen. But if anybody also saw them in February, come forward, let us know. We'd love to hear it and see pictures.
Now, though, to circle back to these 14, and again, they're accurate costumes. I mean, this is not, this is not cosplay. These are professionally made costumes. And that was the thing. I was telling Eric, it was like, where did these come from? And I actually looked, well, maybe there's a He-Man arena show now traveling around the country, and that's where they pulled these outfits from. And it's like, no, that doesn't happen till 87. And it's like, well, then are they, are these 14 different outfits for people who travel around the country and go to toy stores? That doesn't make any sense. But Eric was the one who figured this out. And tell the nice folks where these costumes appeared before they were at Universal Hollywood.
Gotta love people that comment on YouTube, because I was watching that ad and somebody down there was like, hey, did you ever see this? These were the same costumes they used at the Macy's Day Parade in 1985. And of course, I go to Google, and you can, guys, this is a must watch. You go over there. But if you watch the 1985 Macy's Day Parade, you will see that it's essentially, I think Pat Sajak does his best to introduce this whole thing, and it's a giant float with all of these characters, the same 14 characters, and they have they have some type of fight, and they're playing music in the background, and it was lovely. You could tell that it's exact stuff. So less than a month later, those same costumes, very likely the same ones, were up in the upper lot at the parade. But the funny thing is, Jim, did you see that there's also one in 86 they did something similar?
No.
Yeah, so in 86 they did another float, but this time Dolph Lundgren, who at the time was cast as He-Man in the upcoming film, we'll talk about that, but he basically introduced them in, and it was the same platform and stuff, but a separate fight. So it's a nice little two nice little YouTube videos to go find out there.
Okay, and just a quick side note here, because again, the folks at Macy's have been very kind to me in the past and sort of clued me into their parade studio over in Hoboken, New Jersey. And here's the thing: when you watch these YouTube clips of this huge, Castle Grayskull on one side and Snake Mountain on the other, here's the thing, Eric, that float that you're looking at has to fold down to small enough to fit through the Lincoln Tunnel, because it has to come into the city to be in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. It's got to come through the tunnel from Hoboken, and then once it's in the city, up by the Museum of Natural History, before Macy's Thanksgiving Day Parade. They're busy unfolding the float and putting it together, and then as soon as the parade's over, just around the block from 34th Street, where the Macy's flagship is, they're tearing down the float and getting ready to drive it back through the Lincoln Tunnel to Hoboken.
Yeah, and that makes it so much even more impressive when you look at it. So it's quite impressive. But
okay, so now back to the theme park.
Right, we have the vintage photos, right, that's circulating online right now that we just saw, and the characters you could meet, with the same on the floats, was He-Man, She-Ra, Skeletor, Man-at-Arms, Orko, the Sorceress, Hordak, which was fun to look at, and there were so many more. You can almost, if you freeze frame it on the commercial, you can see those, and you can kind of go down the line. But that is, it's very interesting to see. But there's only like 6 photos online for this entire time, because it was a brief, really contained marketing activation. It wasn't like a pilot for anything bigger. And compared to Conan's decade-long stage residency, I guess they were just more into Conan than they were into He-Man.
Well,
and
again, they Universal. It was a film property, and more to the point, during this same time, Universal had its deal with Arnold Schwarzenegger, and the notion is, we're going to make another Conan, right? And it's like, as soon as they do Terminator, or Predator, True Lies, Arnold suddenly got very busy.
Yeah. So He-Man never made it back, so to speak, in the parks in a capacity like that, even though it was a hit and so forth. But Conan did make it, like you kind of mentioned. There was the Masters of the Universe Power Tour, and a lot of people were talking about this online, and that was a full theatrical stage production that went across to arenas in United States and Canada all the way throughout 1987. So almost right after. And I don't know if they used the same outfits or not, but it was essentially He-Man and She-Ra and their heroic warriors. They were transported to Earth for a show's story, and it had original music and elaborate costuming, and that was a pretty big deal. They made it all across the country.
It did, and again, LA being the entertainment capital of the world, when the Power Arena Tour thing got their what was it? Tom Bradley, the mayor of L.A. Again, as a mayor, you do interesting things. Can you talk about what he did in honor of this tour?
Oh, well, it was Masters of the Universe Day on April 28th. So, I mean, it's a shame that we missed that this year. It's probably next year. It's going to be the 50th, whatever anniversary of it. So let's be sure to.
We'll get a card and a cake.
That's it. Yeah. So but that happened for a while. And that was probably the closest He-Man ever got to like a large scale physical presence. Conan kind of had that. But there was this movie, and you can probably talk a little bit more about this movie, right?
Yeah. I mean, in fact, the irony here is we mentioned earlier in today's show, Gary Goddard, the gentleman who made the Conan the Barbarian Sword and Sorcery show at Universal. He got recruited by the Cannon Group to make a Masters of the Universe movie. And as Eric mentioned earlier, had Dolph Lundgren playing He-Man and Frank Langella, Broadway's Dracula as Skeletor. And by the way, he only took the job, Frank Langella, because his kid loved the He-Man figures.
Yeah.
And, but it was a $22 million film. And I wish I could say it turned out okay when it was released to theaters in August of 1987. But here's the thing. Canon was running out of money while it was being made. In fact, if you want to hear a wonderful history of this live-action Masters of the Universe movie, you want to head over to the Hubbubbery. That's Dan Graney, who's the co-host of the marvelous Disney podcast with me. He and Hunter just did a spectacular look back at this movie that walks you through, just what went wrong. Again, they'd only made $4 million and change when it was released to theaters, and just it was a wipeout. And there have since been attempts to reboot, right? I want to say there was was it an animated series in '89? What did they do there?
Well, there were a couple reboots that they tried. The New Adventures of He-Man, it didn't seem like it captured that momentum. And kind of, truth be told, by the early '90s, there were other things. I mean, you got like Ninja Turtles coming out, you got Power Rangers, you got other characters. Mm-hmm. So He-Man kind of came and gone, but the movie didn't really reignite it in '87. Like, they needed another budge. And truth be told, I mean, with a budget of $22 million, it just came in at $17 million. You didn't even make that back, and Hollywood math. I know from listening to you and Drew. What is it, 2-3 times, right?
Yeah, no. So, if you don't make back 3 times your production budget, it's only at that point you finally officially come into the black.
Yeah.
So, I feel bad because, again, Gary tells wonderful stories about working on this thing. But it's just hard when you're in the middle of making a movie and the studio is literally turning off the lights.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is, we skip forward to the 2000s, and this is what's interesting, is that there have been attempts, and all properties, if there was any money in any IP, they try to milk it, they try to bring it back, they do whatever they can to bring back. And it was I think 2002, there was a reboot for the Cartoon Network, and it was produced by Mike Young Productions, and it was actually like a creative success and well animated and well received, but it only ran 2 seasons before it was canceled. And then there was, this is the one I'm most familiar with because I actually bought some toys for my son because I'm like, why is He-Man toys on the shelves? And in 2021, there was a revival on Netflix. Did you ever get to catch any of these?
Oh, this is the Kevin Smith show.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, he put it together because he was a fan, I'm assuming, his passion project, right?
And he did a spectacular job. And again, Kevin is not passing through the fan community. Kevin is one of us. So that, in fact, what I love about Kevin Smith is do you ever seen the Kevin Smith in action figure? Kevin when he used to be heavier, but
Okay.
the notion, it's an action figure because he's fat. So
Okay, I get it. Well,
okay.
so they had that, but it wasn't. I mean, it was bringing it back to light, and there were people that knew of He-Man, but I think really what triggered the big one is that success of the Barbie movie, because I think Mattel was like, "Ooh, we see money here." This was kind of female driven, so that's how we kind of land in 2026, right?
Yeah, with the Masters of the Universe movie, directed by Travis Knight. By the way, the gentleman most closely associated with Leica. Though, if you saw that Bumblebee movie a couple of years ago from the Transformers series, that was Travis, and that was another reason he got this gig. But we got. Was it Nicholas Gazalzine as He-Man, and of course Jared Leto as Skeletor,
right?
And that came out in early June, right?
Yeah. So, and it obviously they were trying to get this made for quite some time, and I think it went through Warner Brothers, Sony, Netflix, but like you said, Amazon basically picked this up, and it kind of and it had a budget of about 170, 200 million, and it opened to almost about 30 million domestically. So it was the best opening of the franchise's history. Which is not. I mean, there were cartoon movies that I didn't mention in this story, but for the most part, it was kind of skewed more heavily nostalgic adults rather than the family and kid demographic. So it didn't really get to be that true blockbuster. So only about 5% of the opening weekend were people were under 12. So and it had a huge drop off, 71%, which is not good, right?
No, you anytime you're over 60% drop off in box office, that's not good.
Yeah.
And what is it? The critics weren't necessarily high on this either. I mean, what is it? 67 freshness over at Rotten Tomatoes.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, the audience rating was significantly higher, 87%, right?
Right, because it's all people like, my brother and I. You were playing with it, and there's a lot of callbacks. You're like, I had that toy. I had Skunk Man or whatever it was. So, but you mentioned earlier, and this is where it gets really interesting, is that even though the financial success necessarily isn't there, the sequel is already reported in development, and that Amazon was happy enough with what they were seeing, which this is fascinating. It was the first time that I actually realized it. So, because I'm a hold my hand up, I am guilty. I did not see this in the theater. I like He-Man enough that I'm willing to research and do a show with you, Jim, about it, but my butt is waiting for it to hit streaming, and I think Amazon kind of realizes that there are people out there like me that I'm only going to see a couple movies in theaters. But as soon as it comes streaming or whatever, I'm involved and I'm going to participate in other ways. And I think that's maybe why we're getting a sequel, because they're betting on this franchise and they know there's a lot of people that maybe just aren't necessarily going to go out to the theater as much.
And you're not wrong, because what's fascinating, for example, Mandalorian and Grogu didn't necessarily do the business that the folks who run the theatrical side of Disney would have wanted. But on the other hand, you talk to the people who are in charge of Disney Plus, they're like, already Mandalorian Grogu is a success, because we've seen, explosive or an explosion in the numbers of for viewing of the 3 seasons of the Mandalorian show. Likewise, all of the Star Wars titles. In fact, we mentioned at the top of the show interview that Chris Melandri and Pierre Coffin did about the new Minions movie, Minions and Monsters, and they actually talk about this. The notion of you make this movie to be released theatrically, but in today's world, it's far more likely that a kid is going to see this thing, streaming. They're going to watch it on a phone. They're going to watch it on a laptop, and so that's the thing when you're making this movie, you want it on a big screen, but you have to sort of we also got to take into consideration that we're staging this, that someone will be watching this on their iPhone, in a couple of weeks. And the business has changed, but it does say a lot about how Amazon feels about the He-Man movie. It's like, no, absolutely, we're going back to the well.
Right. Because today is, and we have a Universal show, right?
Yeah.
We kind of want to say, well, okay, well, we're talking He-Man a lot. Yes, there's a little bit of Universal thread. So, like, what does this have to do with Universal still? So it's kind of funny. So, obviously they had their 1 weekend, 2 weekends, in December, 40 years ago. So, is Universal done with He-Man? So it's not actually, it's quite interesting. June 2019. Did you know she returned up as a real scheduled meet and greet outside of the Lost Continent?
No.
Yes. When I was looking, I was like, He-Man had to show up at some point in time. But it was kind of funny because She-Ra wasn't tied to Mattel's Masters Universe for this when she came in. It was actually more of a deal because she was promoting a 2018 Netflix reboot of She-Ra and the Princess Power, which was Netflix. And that was done by DreamWorks Animation Studio. So He-Man never showed up, but She-Ra showed up in 2019. So the whole question of like, all right, is there a possibility that He-Man, if Amazon picks it up, could Universal do something with it? But it's actually funny. No, we don't really think, or at least I don't think, you guys can tell us that there'll be any type of He-Man attraction for a couple reasons. But you will get He-Man there. Obviously, we noticed that they're in retail. So they started.
You mentioned at the top of today's show that gift shop from as you exit out of the Bourne attraction over at Universal Florida.
Right. Well, there was some in Hollywood when we were out there. I remember seeing a couple He-Man shirts. So they have there. So there is a licensing agreement, which isn't anything radical or crazy. I mean, I saw Care Bear stuff there. So it's not like, like Universal will license with different things. But the funny thing is, Jim, and this is kind of what attracted me when I was researching this, it doesn't seem like He-Man's going to end up in a Universal theme park, but Mattel Adventure Park. The company's own branded venture. Now, if you're not familiar, it's basically, there's 2 locations planned, I think. One is in Glendale, Arizona, and the other one's in Boner Springs, Kansas. Right? There has been talk, and this is what's proposed, a Masters of the Universe contribution. It's the He-Man vs. Skeletor laser tag in a giant arena built to look like Castle Grayskull with a giant 3D printed He-Man and Skeletor figures flanking the entrance. That is where you probably could see it, but here's the catch, is neither park is opened, right?
Okay.
The Glendale location was first announced in 2021? With a 2022 opening date, and that slipped to 23, and then 24, and then late 25. And as of right now, there's no mentioning. It's just basically if you go to the website, it's coming soon. But the Hot Wheels roller coaster is still visible from the highway, and the construction is still there. So there's obviously delays, but that is where He-Man's supposedly going in this park. Now, Jim, I know you've mentioned it before, but this Mattel Adventure Park is kind of fascinating.
It is. But again, we're talking now about a property that, again, it's Amazon, a streaming service that's made this movie, sent it out theatrically, and it'll soon be showing up. But again, they're saying late summer. But I bring this up because, in fact, later this month, when is it we're headed to Philly now? It's like a week, 10 days, right?
It's a couple of days from the recording now, Jim, we might be there now. No.
We might be there now, folks. But yes, Eric and Lauren and I, and potentially Nancy, if we can push her into the car, we're headed down to Philly to finally visit the Universal Museum exhibit at the Franklin Institute. But our buddy from our Patreon project, Disney Unpacked, Jim Schul, was like, "Oh, you're going down to Philly? Well, you should go check out Netflix House."
Yes, I've researched. I'm all about it, Jim.
Well, this is the thing. This is in the old King of Prussia Mall, and this is the indoor Netflix attraction that has, well, what does it have? It has a Wednesday-themed, an hour-long Wednesday-themed adventure and an equally long Stranger Things-themed adventure. And, it just, for me, it's like, wow, okay, well, if I get to do that, I really would want to go to some place where I could have a He-Man adventure that's based on this Amazon movie, which, by the way, I hear is a lot of fun.
Yeah. So, I mean, and that's the thing is, I think we all, when we started looking at these photos and circulating, that's been coming around and be like, oh, that'd be really cool to kind of He-Man. It seems like this could be his moment. But I just don't see it happening. I mean, there's a lot of different plays. The movie just didn't do gangbusters. It's kind of owned by another property. Mattel is having a park. And I mean, at the best that we can get now is probably a shirt off the rack, So like, well, we'll be happy with what we get. And I mean, the ingredients are there, essentially. I mean, He-Man is well known, but it's just that none of them has ever been like pressing enough. I mean, Universal's never really made the effort or had the willpower or the power itself. He-Man has had the power the whole time. It's just never quite found anybody at Universal willing to build him a castle that would last. So,
all right. As we close out here, though, what's fascinating about what the folks at Amazon, and remember again, Travis Knight, the guy who directed the He-Man movie, a talented guy, and evidently they're trying to persuade him to come back because it's like, look, we established the world, we established the characters, we established the look, and so in a weird sort of way, we're back to 1979 when they made the first Star Trek movie, Star Trek the Motion Picture, which, by the way, one of the worst films in American cinema history. It's slow. It's very slow. You spend a lot of time looking at teeny tiny ships go by big alien vessels. But in the last 2 minutes of that movie, it becomes the Star Trek movie you wanted to see. And Paramount learned all of the lessons it needed to learn about how to make a good Star Trek movie. And then in 1982, we got Star Trek: The Wrath of Khan, which is considered the gold standard for the Trek movies, and effectively relaunched the rebirth of that franchise because they figured out how to make a good one. And that's what I keep hearing from folks around the He-Man thing, especially with the development now of the sequel. It's like, okay, so we got the He-Man the motion picture out of the way. All right, that we now need to make He-Man the Wrath of Khan, the good movie that people turn out for, and also maybe we need to get the budget under control for the second film, but that's another story.
Yeah, no. So I mean, I'm all for it, and at probably by the time this is airing, I've probably seen the movie. It's probably out on digital, and people like myself maybe coughed up money to do that or bought a subscription. So. But I'm fascinated with that whole, and thanks for Stingray for tagging us.
No, absolutely. Thanks for nudging us in this direction. And by the way, if you enjoyed today's feature, I want to clue you into the fact that Eric has been working on a special series for Jim Hill Media about, if you know your theme park history in Florida, both, Universal Studios Florida as well as the old Disney MGM Studios, once upon a time, professional wrestlers shot shows there, and Eric has worked up an absolutely ridiculously entertaining look back at this time in theme parks in Central Florida, and we're going to get that underway here at Jim Hill Media later this summer. We'll clue you into when that's coming down the pike, folks. But yeah, that again, if you enjoyed today's story, wait till you hear Eric's take on the history of wrestling at the Central Florida theme parks. Anything else, Eric?
No, Jim, I'm just having a blast down here in Florida right now, and I just wish everybody was here with me. But thanks for listening in, guys. Thanks for indulging us and what would be considered the first feature I've wrote for Epic. So, I mean...
you did a great job. Great job.
No, I love your and Jim, you were equally wonderful with many of the stories that I couldn't do because I didn't have the wisdom. I wasn't there. You were.
Hey, that's a nice way of saying you're an old fart. Okay, on that point, that's going to do it for this week, folks, on the Epic Universal Podcast. By the way, if you have any topics or suggestions, like Mr. Stingray, about, hey, you guys should look into, the He-Man thing that they did, well, feel free to send those along to Mr. and myself through social media. But with that, again, want to thank you for listening to this week's show, and we will be back next week. Until then, thanks for listening.